Welcome to Amazing Grays. This show is dedicated to the idea that active, informed older adults are an essential part of today's society. We provide information regarding senior issues and concerns and salute individuals or groups who demonstrate that productivity doesn't end at retirement.
Hi there, welcome to this segment of Amazing Grays. My name is Ed Whitbread, and our guest this morning is one of what Tom Brokaw refers to as the greatest generation. But even by Mr. Brokaw's standards, this is an incredible story. Colonel John Walker, you graduated or studied chemistry at Penn State.
Well, that was my major, right?
In the early 40s. And you ended up essentially doing a dramatic presentation through the latter part of World War II. Let's talk about how that evolved and what it means.
All right.
How does a chemistry major move into essentially smoke and mirrors?
Well, I graduated in 42, and 8 days later I was on active duty, and I was commissioned Chemical Corps because I was a chemistry major, and I got assigned right away to smoke generator operation and sent to the West Coast where they were needing a large area of smoke screens over Lockheed and the aircraft factories. And then I went from there to Alabama and took command of a company and got it ready to go to Europe. But just before it went to Europe, they changed officers. And I lost, I could say I lost the job, I guess, but They one day, it was an all-black company, and they took the four of us officers out and put new ones in and sent them to Europe. So I had the experience of getting them ready to go to Europe. And that experience came into play then in what evolved as something very unique.
Okay, let's talk about the unit that you ended up in.
And they sent me to Army Experimental Station, Pine Camp, New York. And at that point, they were activating and furnishing the equipment to the 3132nd Signal Service Company Special. And that's the unit that I went up there to assist, and I was assigned to AES actually, but in assisting them to get ready to go, they did not have a supply officer. And that's the role I filled.
So you became a supply officer, but let's talk about the role that this particular, it sounds like just another unit in a huge army. What was the objective of this unit?
The objective of the unit was to portray to the German army the fact that we had a whole large element of American troops coming into an area, getting ready to attack or whatever.
Now you had, total capacity was about 1,100 people?
1,100 people
and you were to represent how many?
Our brigade, and we could represent about 65,000.
So
it started out to represent a division, maybe 18, 19,000, but they decided no, they wanted to be able to signify a corps, which would be about 60-some thousand troops. And we would do this by visual means, radio means, sonic sound means, just tanks coming up and getting ready for an armored, let's say we're portraying an armored division. And that armored division then would have to be brought into an area. And they would do this by first having some movement come into an area and show by means of bumper paintings on your Jeep. Your bumper showed you what your unit was. Well, we put on maybe the 6th Armored Division. There was no division, it was just us. And the French collaborators in France, as we went across it, would report that there was armored division coming.
So you would set up an infrastructure for a division.
We had to set up what they needed
Yeah.
to portray the whole, to make them believe
That this unit
that this
existed.
was a real thing coming. And they would do this by creating a false headquarters, put on false rank where some sergeant would want to put 2 stars and be a general for a few days, and be seen around this headquarters that was created, and the camouflage people would also set up a real headquarters company area.
And at the same time, there was communications going on.
At the same time, the
Fake communications.
yeah, the fake communications of one radio unit to another, talking back and forth we wanted the Germans to eavesdrop and find out what we were doing, because they would use this then to bring up their troops or to maneuver something that we hoped they would maneuver.
Okay, you've done this. You've assumed that the enemy is aware that there is a brigade or a unit coming into the area. Some point you have to actually bring the unit in.
Yeah.
And you have to indicate that it's there.
Well, the engineers had rubber tanks, inflated tanks.
Inflatable tanks.
Inflated artillery, inflated 2.5-ton trucks, whatever they wanted. We just blow up the fake unit, the fake item, and arrange it in such a way that we would normally camouflage, partial camouflage, because we wanted it to be seen.
And in addition to that, the visual, probably more important was the audio.
Yes, well, the same thing. If you're going to have a unit, have a lot of units equipment there, somebody better have heard them arrive, especially if it's a tracked vehicle, and you got the big tank making the noise coming in. So we needed to be able to project to the enemy the sound of tanks. To do that, we'd use it for magnetic wire instead of magnetic tape. It was magnetic wire, and we would record and have dubbed onto that wire the sound of tanks, the sound of bridge building, the sound of supply operations, being loading and unloading things that would normally occur when a unit's getting ready to move.
And those could project how far?
We'd normally go up on high ground, maybe a hillside like a vineyard, and move in with our equipment, which was half tracks at that time. And as a platoon leader, I had 6 half tracks, and we moved them in the evening and during the whole night, and then we would bring up the speakers from the back rear of those half tracks and turn them toward the enemy and project a distance of probably 10 or 12 miles.
10 or 12 miles. And you did this for 2 years.
Well, actually 1 year of doing it.
Yeah.
But I started we were in Pine Camp, New York back in the beginning of 44, in January of 44. And we went overseas later that year, went in through England. And even in England, before we ever got to the continent, the signal units were able to talk one to each other and present false radio traffic to the enemy listing post.
And when you wrapped this thing up at the end of the war, you were told not to talk about it for how long?
50 years.
And the reason for that?
They wanted to keep this. This was an unknown thing, and we were assigned to 12th Army Group. Even the Army commanders knew about us, and whatever corps area we were in would be called upon to know something about it. But they did not know the detail of what was going on. They just knew the effects that we were producing. And those effects we were trying to keep this as a whole, ace in a hole, to be used in future warfare. So they said, don't tell anybody, even our wives, our children. In 96 then, the 50 years was up, and I had the first reunion here in Erie.
Okay, we are coming up against the clock. 9 minutes,
Yeah.
10 minutes goes by
Right.
incredibly quick. And there is so much more that we could talk about. If our audience is interested in doing that or interested in learning about this, there are 2 books.
Yeah.
And this is the Ghosts of the ETO,
European Theater of Operations.
European Theater of Operations,
Yeah.
very detailed graphs,
Yeah.
so forth. The second one, which I have looked at on Amazon.com, is Secret Soldiers.
Right.
And this is a different type of book?
Yes, it's more of a, I'd call it an easy reading storybook. This is easier reading. The detailed one has a lot of the military.
Quick read, nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
Colonel, it has been an absolute pleasure, and I thank you for coming in today.
Well, glad to be part of the spreading of this knowledge. It was late to get it documented and known abroad, and our wives and children finally got to hear us, and we have been recording on tape things for them to preserve.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hello, thanks for joining us on this segment of The Amazing Grays. I'm Rebecca.
Thank you for watching Amazing Grays. We are an all-volunteer organisation and are always looking for people to help us produce interesting programmes.